Hello, and welcome to the Winded podcast, a podcast where we share stories of the times in life where we feel most alive, from adventures to hardships to when life knocks us off our feet. These stories are here to inspire. And today, I have a very special guest on to continue the Overcoming series, which is a series here where we bring guests who have taken on life challenges and have created good into the world, not in spite of the challenges, but because of them. And I first met today's guest when I was in college at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire for entrepreneurship. And she was my professor for several classes in the entrepreneurship program, which she directed. And I hope none of my other professors are listening because she has to be my favorite for many reasons, not just because of her calm, laid back approach to teaching, which allowed so much entrepreneurial creative freedom, but also because of her unending support for me and the other students, and not just while we were in the program, but even after. And now, after years of teaching and directing that program, our guest has retired. Although I'm sure she's still supporting entrepreneurs and startups, she has now took on a new venture of her own. She is now an author and a consultant and a small business owner. Welcome on, Anne Rupnow.
Goodness, I think we should just call that a wrap. Oh, Klein, thank you so much. You are so kind, and I have such fond memories of, yeah, teaching in the UW-Eau Claire Entrepreneur Program, directing it, met so many wonderful students, and you were one of the top students. I had to say one of in case somebody catch. Yeah, and I'm just so glad to still be connected to you. So thank you for reaching out. It's an honor.
Thank you too for coming on. And again, just to reiterate, that's one of the reasons you've always stood out to me is because it feels like you've always seen your students as people and entrepreneurs, not just students. And it really creates this atmosphere of respect. And I see you as a person too. And I think it's because you opened up that space of it's not so much a teacher student dynamic as it is a person to person dynamic. And I'm really grateful that you're able to come on today too.
So happy to hear that because that's what we are. We're people first, right? And then everything else. I've always felt like you don't bring one person to work and then you're someone else somewhere else. It just doesn't make sense. So for better or worse in my career, I've kind of been myself wherever I've been. And for the most part, I think it serves a person well. There are challenges here and there. So it especially makes me happy to hear that you felt that because I do feel that closeness with students as people. They're not just a student and a grade in a grade book. They are a person that you get to interact with, and it's a rich experience. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that I had those years to do that because I they made me a better person just getting to know you and all. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you certainly made an impact too. And a couple things I want to talk to you about today are your book and retirement and the impact that that's made on it, but also on a human level, just a person to person level. What are some fun things that you've been up to besides work? Any fun hobbies?
Yeah, it's surprising how busy one can get when one has discretionary time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, of course, I love, and part of my reason for moving out of Eau Claire, although I'm still near Eau Claire, is family and just having more time and being closer to two of my three grown sons and daughters in law and grandchildren. That has made my life so full in a just meaningful way. It's one of the best things. So I love that. I knew I would. But other things are because I moved, I got to create a new space and I love that. I was never into thrifting before. I didn't, I'd go occasionally with a friend and it just wasn't my thing, and now I love it. I think because I have the luxury of some more time that isn't, like, every minute determined where I need to be or what I need to do. So I'm enjoying finding some treasures and, bringing them into my home and decorating. One thing that I was eager to do in retirement, and it has been as great and as exciting as I thought it would be, is pickleball. I had dabbled in it like a little bit, but didn't have much time. And so I did join a club up here so that I could play indoors all year long. And I love the sport. I think by now I should be a lot better than I am, but I'm enjoying it and moving, and that's great. But the community was something I hadn't really thought about because not that we hang out, most of us outside of pickleball, but there's a community there and just greeting people that you see all the time and and meeting new people, and it's just been a really kind of surprise community that I've found, and I enjoy that a lot. So that's a little sprinkling, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's so fun. And yeah, like you said, community is so important throughout life and especially life changes like moving, finding a new community where you move. I I like you have also gotten into thrifting a little bit more. Like this dress that I'm wearing, I thrifted from a cute store near Madison. And yeah, it's so fun to find those hidden gems, isn't it?
It is, it is. I have so much fun doing it. At times I've thought, "I can only use so much stuff. I guess I'm gonna have to try to be a reseller or something," but I don't really wanna get into that, so I just restrict myself
Yeah.
a bit.
Yeah. So I want to hear a little bit more about your book. And I know you've told me a little bit about your story. And to me, your story and your journey in writing the book is so fascinating. So can you take us sort of along a timeline from, when you first had the idea, what first inspired you, and the little drops of inspiration along the way that really encouraged you to get it written and put it out there.
Yeah, so, well, one thing in retirement, I have found that I love to have a project going, whether that's a side gig. I've got a couple of those, as you mentioned, or some sort of a passion project. It doesn't have to be to earn money. It can be something that I want to do. So the book, there were lots of things leading up to it, but why I even was like thinking about it, about anything related to that, was because I was winding down on a couple of projects. So I'll just say that, and then we'll step way back. A little bit of my family history. My grandparents on my dad's parents, so on my dad's side, they were pioneer missionaries to Africa. They went over by boat in 1918. So, growing up as a young girl, I was always aware of that heritage and that most people's grandparents, you know, didn't do something like that. My grandparents passed when I was very young. In fact, I have no memory of my grandmother. I would think I was 2 when she died. And my grandfather, I was 5. I had just turned 5. I have a little memory of him, but not too much. So, but I was always aware, I was proud, because in the church denomination that I was in, it was a smaller denomination. They were kind of like famous people in it, the pioneer missionaries. And so I was proud of them and that heritage. But I will say, I'm a prayer. And even as a young girl, I grew up being a prayer. And I remember praying more than once, God, please don't send me to Africa. I desperately did not want to follow in the footsteps of my grandparents, who I respected and admired so much, but I didn't like spiders, or I wasn't a rustic camper. I just thought, please don't call me there. And so with that little bit of background, then I never really, other than, thinking it was so cool what my grandparents had done, I never really spent much time into adulthood thinking about it. I never did feel a call to Africa, which I was thankful for, and my life went on. And then it was 2010 on Easter Sunday. I went to the church that I had grown up going to because my mother was still alive and she wanted to go to this service. And I thought, yeah, I'll take mom to that Easter service. That will be fun and special. So we went to the church that I knew so well, and a man was there from Africa. He was a pastor who had been taking some course in Chicago, and he was visiting a couple in Eau Claire that went to the church. It was Bethesda. And so we got introduced, my mom and I, to him, and he was like, "You are Revney's granddaughter?" He was like, "I am so honored to meet you." And it was sort of like, wow, okay. He's like,
You're
we,
famous.
yeah. Yeah. So that was a special thing for my mom and I. And then he wanted to get my contact info. He had left his wife and family over there to come over here for this course, but he wanted to keep in touch with Revenue's granddaughter. And so he went back to Chicago, and I got this email from him that week. And one of the things he said in it was, "I'm sure you pray for the church in Africa." And I read that and I looked at it and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, my grandparents like founded the church in Africa in northern Cameroon. And I don't ever pray for it. I don't even think to pray for that church." I mean, I guess I'm sad to admit it, but I'm just being honest. It honestly had just not crossed my mind. That wasn't on my prayer list. So in my email, how I addressed that was I said, "I will pray for the church in Africa." So anyway, we conversed a little bit and he thought that, have you visited? You should visit and so forth. And as I began to pray for the church in Africa and from this meeting with him, I began to be interested in my grandparents' life. Suddenly, I wanted to know more. Like, what did they do over there, and where exactly did they live again, and how did it all go? And so I started by asking a couple in Eau Claire that had been missionaries to Cameroon, and now they were pastoring at the church in Eau Claire. And they were great friends of my parents. So it was an easy ask to start talking to them about it. And they had me over for dinner and we chatted about Cameroon and about my grandparents. And they said, "You should meet Solveig because she wants to go back." She was a missionary there for a few years back in the 60s. And we've heard that she wants to go back and visit. So anyway, this woman who's, nearly 20 years older than me, I reached out to her upon their suggestion. We connected, and before we had ever met in person, Solveig and I had booked a flight and a trip to Cameroon.
That must be kind of interesting looking back on, of never
Yeah,
having met someone in person and booking a trip to Africa, the place with spiders and all the things that you were hoping not to visit, but to do that with with almost a stranger. Wow.
I know. All I can say is it was meant to be because honestly, that's not my nature. I don't generally do things like that, I don't think. But I did trust, obviously, these friends, this pastor and his wife, and I had this strong desire that came seemingly out of nowhere to go visit.
And
So
so what year was this now?
so that was now I so Easter Sunday, I met that man in 2010, so this was late summer into fall.
Wow. So this all transpired pretty quickly.
It did.
Yeah.
It did, very quickly. So, yeah, the timing, timing in this world.
Mhm.
You've encountered that
Yeah.
too. It's an interesting thing. Yeah. So, we talked on the phone and we booked our trip and we're like, "Well, I suppose we should meet before we go over there." We were gonna leave the end of January. So I invited her to Eau Claire, and she came and stayed with me one weekend, and we met and we hit it off delightfully. She is so sweet, and yeah, it was just a friendship that was meant to be for sure. And she brought some documents because she was volunteering in the mission office at the church headquarters, which is where she lived, because she had that bit of mission background herself and interest in it. So before she came to visit me and meet me, she brought some documents out of the archives that she thought I might be interested in from my grandparents. And so when she arrived on that Friday, we set some documents on this desk right near the living room, but then we talked and talked late into the night. She went into the guest bedroom to retire for the night, and I was on my way upstairs to my room, and I looked at that pile and I thought, I should just glance at it quick. Well, I was up a long time after that because I grabbed the pile and I started reading, and what I was reading were letters that my grandfather had written and or dictated to somebody the year that he was about to pass. So he was in his 70s. And he started these by saying, I realize I haven't been good about sharing my stories. And so he said, so these stories are for my grandchildren. And when I read that, I was, how old was I? I was in my early 50s. And I'm like, I'm reading this now, stories that grandpa wanted me to read. And I'm like, have my sisters ever seen it? So anyway, he had left these stories for us. We had never seen them. I asked my mom, who was still alive then. She had never seen them. And the next morning, Solveig was shocked. She thought she was probably bringing us a copy. She didn't know we had never seen or read those stories. And nobody was trying to keep them from us. It was just one of those things that sort of fell through the cracks somewhere along the line, and we had missed it.
So, how do you feel now that you didn't get to read those until this point in time where it was time to make the trip? Are you happy that it transpired that way?
Yeah. I think because of how everything has unfolded, it was just meant to be.
Yeah.
It was the time in this life when I was ready to receive them and make a big deal out of them, and they meant something to me and spoke to me. And I had just another little piece of it, I had just started blogging a little bit. This was back when that was sort of newish, at least to me, and I had wanted to dabble in that. It's since been retired, but I needed blogging material, and I had been praying about that, and suddenly I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, look at this material." And so I that is a piece of the story, and that kind of got me thinking about sharing those stories back then, which I did a little bit through a blog that was seen by a few close friends and families.
I mean, there's so many significant parts of your story, but this feels like so significant. I got chills as you were mentioning the whole story of finding these and reading these, and what you mentioned about your grandfather stating in the letters. I realized that I haven't been very good at sharing my stories, and I feel like there's a lesson there for everyone too, is as we're living life, it almost feels like what we're doing is just it can feel so day to day if we let it, but to recognize how incredible some of our stories are and to give them the light of day, I think is something important to hear.
Yeah, you're so right. Stories are powerful.
Yeah.
They are really powerful to shape one's own life, to inspire others, and the timing of them is so intriguing too. It encourages me because we don't have to fret or worry, "Oh, no, I'm missing it." I'm not doing it when I should, or, "Oh, I have to get to this," because I can kind of be a driver for myself. Not always the kindest about it, like, "Oh, come on, get this done." But really, there is a time and a story that needs to be shared and meant to be shared. Sometimes it needs it right away, and sometimes it sits for years, and then its time comes. So, not that it would have been bad if those stories had come out sooner, but they were not gonna be buried.
Wow,
Yeah.
how special.
Yeah.
So what happened next then?
Yeah, so we went to Africa that January, and I got to see the village where my grandparents spent the most of their time. However, they traveled around a lot and opened different mission stations, but Yagua, Cameroon, was where they lived and worked the most. I got to, stand in the building that my grandpa had built as their home. It was, run down by now, but there was still a good remnant of it left, and it was a very emotional journey for me in a lot of joy, like overwhelming joy, some tears, just emotional tears for sure. I I got to see the remains of a chassis of his Model T that had come over by boat, and and things were still there, which is very crazy. Things were still there. And just to stand in the on the plot of land where they had, you know, taught some farming skills in a different way. The people were farmers, but here's some ideas and some planting, and um, brought some neem trees from Nigeria, and I saw the big trees around there that they had probably helped bring to that community, and so my heart was full. Solvay is the only reason I could go because she knows French. She's pretty fluent in French, and she knows, which is the trade language of Northern Cameroon, and she knows the local language as well from her time there, which had been years earlier, but she's remarkable. So she enabled the trip, and it was meant to be. I don't know how I would have, like, if I wanted to go over any other time, I don't know how you would have to go with somebody that knows. So we had a driver to drive us around. We went to visit people, and one of the most remarkable experiences of my life for sure, as you can imagine.
It sounds like it. Wow.
Yeah. So I was journaling during most of that trip. And so I had those writings from that as well. Um, and, a very meaningful piece of that trip was that pastor that I met in Eau Claire that Easter Sunday. I never saw him in Africa because he was schooling in the Central African Republic while I was there, but he arranged for a little ceremony at my grandmother's grave. So pastors and some of the local people met us the day that I was going to be visiting, and the women sang some songs. They presented me with some gifts, and they had swept off the gravestone, and I stood by my grandmother's grave, my grandmother who I never knew, and I just wept.
Yeah.
I felt so close to this lady that I had no memory of, but I knew we were connected.
Mhm.
The people just stood around me. They all got quiet, and they just stood with me while I wept, and then one of the pastors put his hand on my shoulder and prayed, and it was quite a day, quite a day. They were very dear people to do that. How generous. And one of them said, "It was good of you to come." So I felt like I was representing the broader family because they remembered my grandparents, or if they were too young and didn't know them, they knew of them. And so I was so glad too that somebody from the family still to show them we still remember, even though, as I told you, I wasn't a very good rememberer for a lot of years.
Yeah. As you had told that part, I was just filled with chills and just to highlight how special that was, and to me, I feel like that speaks to what an impact that your grandparents made on that community in a positive way, that not only the people who were there when your grandparents were there remembered, but their impact is also, it sounds like, passed down to their children.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. So, yeah, it was 2 weeks I'll never forget, and, was wonderful, and going with Solvay, and then I'm back home and back to full-time job and back to life, and but carried that with me for sure, and talked about it when I got the chance. But then more years went by, right? So to continue, next thing I know, it's January of 25. And as I said, a couple of projects were winding down. And I'm like, well, what should I do now? And I would have thoughts even before the projects were totally wind down. I was thinking ahead because I have found I do like to do something industrious besides my pickleball and family and all of that. So I was thinking about it. What will I do next? And what would be good? And I would think, remember that little bit of blog? Remember Africa? Was there any purpose to that or anything to do with that beyond those years and talking with my family occasionally about it? And the thought entered my mind, well, maybe I should put it in a book, but I didn't really see a path. I wasn't really sure how I would even do that. So I just sort of dismissed it. But then, a few weeks later, well, what do I want to do? I do like to write, but ooh, how would it even look? I couldn't really envision how this book would look or how it would all weave together, fit together. But I'm a prayer, so I was praying about like what's the next thing I should do, or what would be a good project. And then one day in the winter, I'm guessing around February that year, which was just last year, I was in Eau Claire. My sisters and I were having a coffee at Caribou on Claremont, and it was a really, really cold day. And we had parted, hugged goodbye. We were each heading off to our own cars, and across the cold parking lot, my younger sister, Sandy, yells, "Oh, Anne, by the way, Dale so and so asked me the other day, when is Anne going to write her book?" And I'm like, "Oh," she's like, "Well, bye, we'll talk later." Because it was freezing. I got in my car and I sat there for a moment, a little stunned, because I didn't know I'd ever talked about writing a book. And I never see this Dale person, but he and his wife are dear people that went to the church that I visited that Sunday. And so I've known them throughout much of my life. But that Sandy had bumped into him and that he said that to her. And then she told me, and again, all in this context of I'm praying, what next? I had thought of a book, but no, I don't think so. And so I did start praying, well, if this would be a good project, then I'm open to it. But I think I need more than this. But my mind was like open to it. So I don't know, a couple weeks later, something else happened. I haven't been able to quite remember exactly what, but some other little insignificant thing that planted the second seed about the book. And so I'm like, well, okay. So I just kind of resurrected what I could find from the past, some of the blogging stuff I had done, got out my grandpa's stories again, and just spent some time thinking about how it could even look, praying through it all. And then I'll tell you, when you get onto something that you're meant to be on, and maybe you've experienced this too, you don't always know it right away, but you know it. It becomes evident. And as I was working on it, I just started knowing I'm onto something I'm meant to do. For whatever reason, this is now. Maybe it's for my great-grandchildren someday, but I need to do this.
Yeah.
And I want to do it, and I want to. And it started being fun, even though I have to say, so then as I started to put this book together, I didn't know how. I didn't know how to prepare the book in such a way to make it interesting. I was thinking primarily grandchildren, maybe great-grandchildren, just so that these stories wouldn't get lost. But then as I was working on the book, this little voice said, "Well, what if somebody else wants to read it? What if this isn't just for your immediate family?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I wouldn't mind sharing it. Of course, I wouldn't mind." And there began this desire in me to create it in such a way that anybody who might be called to the book or be intrigued by it or want to read it or look at it, that it wouldn't be written in such a way that it's just for family. So I decided to self publish, and I thought these days it's easy to self publish. So I published it on Amazon KDP, which I had no idea how to do when I began, but I do like to learn. I'm not sure I'm a very fast learner, but I enjoy learning if it's a topic I'm interested in. Watch so many videos, some of them 2, 3 times. Experimented, tried, how to put your book in Word and then get it so that it will upload correctly into KDP, and on it went. But it was a fun, inspired process. So even though it was work, and when I ran into snags, it was really not fun at all. Um, I ended up getting it published last November.
Wow. I feel like there's a
Yeah.
couple things to unpack here. Number one being, it sounds like your intentions for writing this book were so pure in that it unfolded over time. Like you mentioned, your first intention was to pass down the stories to your grandchildren. And then you just felt this nudge that what if someone else wants to read this? And what if it is important for them to read it? And so the intention for this book, it sounds like, was never to make money or become a famous author. It was just purely to share the story.
Yeah. Yeah, you are right. In fact, so much so that I'll have people say, "Well, how are you promoting it? I really enjoyed your book. What are you doing to promote it?" And I'm like, "I'm not really." I mean, I put it on Facebook once to my own group of friends, and that was at my sister's nudging. But I just keep coming back to my motivation. It wasn't to make money. I'm fine. I like to make money. So I'm good with a project that makes money, but that was never my motivation. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll change and want to promote it and feel there's good in that and I should. But at this moment, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Other than with friends and talking to people who have interest in it. I end up talking about it, and you reached out, so here we are. But you're right, the motivation is different.
Right. And I think that's totally okay too. And to let it continue to unfold. This might not be the end of your story, pun intended, either, of writing the story. Just how as you were writing, things unfolded in different ways.
Sure.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed about your story is how, you mentioned you prayed on this and little things popped into your life that sound like they could be sort of easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. And I think it's worthy to note that because as we're going through our everyday life, it's so easy to miss these things. But when you have that intention of prayer or whatever practice that it is that people use, it adds meaning to the little things and it makes it a little bit harder to miss. Would you say that was your experience?
Completely. Yeah, I would say completely and continues to be because I am I am a prayer, but that doesn't mean we don't have license and actions, and it feels like a partnership to me. Like I'm not told, "You go do this,"
Mhm.
you know?
Right.
As a little girl, maybe I was afraid he was gonna say, "You go do
Go to
that."
Africa.
Yeah, right. But anyway, it's like when I ask, I think there's something besides asking, and that is what you're getting at, the listening. And where I stumble and have trouble with that sometimes is I'm not a very patient person. So when I ask, like, "Okay, come on, I asked. What's the answer?" And that is often not how it works. And so there's a trust there. There's a patience required even when I'm not feeling patient. But I think so often it's because I only see my piece. I can't see into the future.
Right.
So I don't know where this is going. I'm still waiting on answers, frankly, in my life that I'm expecting, but I'm not demanding. I'm expecting and waiting, and I hope to be telling a story or two going forward. But I don't have those answers yet, and so it's takes some trust, but I will say that sort of makes it more joyful too, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, it's like prayers not being like an Amazon delivery system where you can get it overnight.
Right.
But I think it's a if kind of a fun analogy of how, we used to how shipping used to work, it might be a week, it might be a month, we don't really know, but it'll get here when it gets here, and then, maybe you would appreciate the package a little bit more when it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, for sure.
So, can you share the title of your book and where people can find it?
Well, it's called Praying for Eggs and Getting Fish: Stories of Faith to Encourage and Inspire Us.
I love that so much. And I will put a link in the show notes so that anyone who has heard your story and it piqued a little bit of interest can go check it out. And I want to highlight too, because I don't know that all my listeners are Christian or technically practice faith, but I think that just with life, there's so many great things to learn, even from the stories of faith. And I know you mentioned to me if you want to share sort of a testimonial that you heard from a friend who didn't necessarily share your faith, but enjoyed the book.
Yeah, yeah. So that was fun for me to have her say that because she doesn't share my faith, I don't think. I think she would probably call herself a spiritual person, but in a different way than my faith, probably. And so I had given her a copy, and I thought, you know, whether you read it or not, it doesn't matter. But she had been along with me for the writing, so I wanted to give her a copy of it. And then a couple months later, she's like, "Oh, by the way, I read your book." And it was so good, and I was like, "Oh, thank you for telling me," the usual, and then she said, "So what are you doing to promote it?" I said, "Well, kinda what I told you, I'm not really promoting it." She's like, "No, you need to. People need to know to hear the story." She said, "I really enjoyed it." So that was fun for me to hear because I wanted it written in such a way that I mean, not everybody's gonna like it, clearly, but that you could not believe exactly the same as I do and still find inspiration from it. And so I felt like that confirmed that from her. So I was grateful that she shared that with me.
Absolutely. I mean, just hearing your story of writing it makes me want to pick it up and read it right now.
Well, I would hand you a copy right
Yeah.
now if I could.
Well, I'll order it. I do badly want to read it because I feel this calling too lately to explore my family history. A lot of my family came from Norway. And I just learned that my great grandmother's mom, so my great great grandmother, was rumored to be sort of a gypsy, whatever that means. But I'm like, I'm so curious to hear what that means and if there are any stories or things that I can find to learn about that. Because as your story kind of highlights, if no one writes it down, if no one records it, it can get lost, especially when our elders pass away. So it's definitely inspired me to actually take action on those interests that are going through my head.
Good, good. Yeah, those stories are still relevant, and it's like, "Wow, they did that?" It makes me think I can do more in my easy ways, you
True.
know? They did hard things sometimes, and your gypsy great-grandmother? I wanna hear about that.
So so my sister did one of those DNA test things, and we have a lot of European in us, but there was 3%, I believe it was, Cyprus, which is an island off of
Greece? Or I'm terrible on
it. Me
geography.
too. I should know this. It's somewhere over there near Europe and Africa. It might be kind of like in between. I would have to look at a map, but, um, that was really interesting to learn.
How fun. Well, you'll have to keep me up to date on that.
I will.
So the book, I should tell you, it's written in such a way that it can be like some people have used it as devotionals, like one a day or something. So it's got my grandpa's stories. My dad spent the first 8 years of his life in Africa, so he shares some stories and reflections on his parents, and then my writing from my trip, and then one of my questions in writing it was, "How do I weave this together and make a something that makes sense out of this book?" And so what I ended up feeling inspired to do was I have a reflection, like a short reflection after each of these short stories. So I'm reflecting on my grandpa's stories, then my dad's, and then my own stories from 15 years ago. And so that is sort of the thread that ties it together. Yeah. So it was a little challenging to figure out, but it was fun.
I love that because I've never read anything like that. It's a very creative setup and fascinating too that you have 3 generations of writing.
Yeah, it's not like anything else probably, I can say that.
Yeah. So, if we kinda rewind, I mean, I'm amazed that it was only about a year ago that you started writing, right?
Yeah,
Early 2025, or I guess a year and a half?
and I had writings from my grandpa and dad that I was using, but yeah, I had to do a lot of editing and piecing and figuring it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it went together pretty fast, actually.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, can you take us back real quick? You know, you were praying on your next project, but that had been 15 years after you had taken your trip to Africa. And besides just getting the guidance from getting your prayers answered, I know you talked about the time in your life was around the time you were retiring. Did that have any influence on the timing to get this actually into writing?
Sure, I'm sure. I wouldn't have had the the time, the mental capacity. I wouldn't have even dared gone down a mental path of conceiving of doing a project like that. You know, when you're pouring yourself into a career job that you love, and then that's not the only thing in your life, you do have other things on the side, it's hard to have time for a big creative project. So I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened, but I think the timing was now for a reason because I could devote time to it. I could say, okay, I'm going to sit down and for these 2 or 3 hours, which honestly, I just didn't feel like I had many blocks of 2 or 3 hours. Or if I did, I was resting or needed doing some other activities. And I take that to heart even as I'm telling you now, because it's like, okay, this is a privilege to be able to not be doing something career-wise full time that's taking so much. Rewarding, yes, I loved it, but I want to be a good steward now of this time too. And I have some sort of a drive to always do a little bit more. Not because I feel like I need to be a worthy person, but if you have some capacity to do something, it's good to use it. And so I think I come from that. I don't know what the next thing is, but I feel some amount of capacity and I don't want to waste it. Don't get me wrong. I waste plenty of times, but in general,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you make really good use of your time based on what you've said, but I'm sure there are always moments where, there's a lot of lag time, which I can feel too. So, what was the experience like of going from a career that you really love to having all of this time to devote to other projects that maybe are more creative or just different than what you are used to? Because I'm sure looking back, maybe on the other side, you've gotten through it and you've created something beautiful. But did you have a moment in that in between where it was a little bit harder to adjust?
Yeah, it has been an adjustment all along, and I'm probably still adjusting. And I think that is because of the discretionary time. You have discretion. I didn't have so many choices when I was working in my career. My choices were minimal because I just didn't have as much discretion over enough blocks of time. So when suddenly your blocks of time open up a lot more, then there's a lot of choices. And choices can be exhausting. They can bring with them judgment calls. Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? A little voice in my head can get going like, wait, are you wasting your time? You should be doing this. And so knowing what this is always isn't apparent. But I think one thing that helped me was I had poured myself into my career in a way that I wanted to. And for me, that was in a big way. Like I enjoyed it. I was thankful for it. I loved it. And yep, it took a lot of time and energy. And I had lived in Eau Claire most of my life, almost entirely. And I loved it. I poured myself into Eau Claire, into the people I knew there, the friends, the promotion of Eau Claire. It was great. But I think when you do that and then you move on to the next thing, it's okay. Like, I think of an example. I have 3 sons, and when they were in high school age, they're every other year apart in school. Each of them did 3 seasons of sports. And so, we had a senior and a sophomore, and yeah, we just had bang, bang, bang. We were attending sporting events. I loved watching my sons. Basketball was my favorite. Watching them play basketball, nobody said, you have to go to every game. I wanted to, but it was exhausting carting them around, making sure those things happened and attending. But my point is, looking back, I see I poured myself into it. So much so that when my youngest was graduating high school, several of the parents said, "Oh, man, what are you going to do when your youngest now goes off?" And I was actually becoming alone then as well. And I was like, too, oh dear, I guess everybody thinks I might be having trouble with that. And maybe I will. I hadn't even, had time to think about it. But what I noticed is I didn't. And I think because I poured myself into it all the way, I was tired. It was like, okay to do something else now. And so I think a little bit for me with my retirement story is it's okay to do something else now. It's okay. I maximized my time in Eau Claire. I maximized my job to the degree that I felt I could. And now it's okay to try something different because I didn't leave anything on the table, so to speak. But I will say, that being said, it's a transition. It's a big transition. I enjoyed where I landed. I enjoyed setting up a new home. I enjoyed finding a new life, but I still struggle at times with, am I making the best use of my time? Am I doing what I should be doing? Because there are a lot of choices. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways you could go in any one day. Nobody's like, okay, you've got to do this. This is obvious to do. I have a lot of choices. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I won't lie. It's challenging at times.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of people, not only who have recently retired, but also are going through any big life transition, like moving or I mean, I felt this way after college, this exact thing that you're mentioning, where you go from this structure, whether it's driving your kids around to their games or career or school for me, and then you're like, "Oh, you can do anything you want," especially going to school for entrepreneurship where there's no, set job or set business to go into. It's like, "Wait, I can do anything? I have all the options in the world." I think when I first graduated college and was experiencing this, it was, "What do I want?" And now that, I've explored my faith and spirituality, and it's sort of this mixture of what's my path and also what do I want in this way that you described where it's like you're kind of on a team where it's not all about what I want, but it's also not about being told what to do by whoever. It's sort of this combination of service and doing what we love.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, it's that partnership. And I mean, my sort of prayers are talking in my head off and on all day long. I mean, we're hopefully in sync. You know what I mean? And it's not like I get up in the morning and go down on my knees and pray for 15 minutes and then I get up and I'm done until the next morning. Nothing wrong with that. That's not bad to do. That's not the way I usually do it. I do start the day with some prayer, but yeah, it's more a way of breathing and life and communication with my Heavenly Father. And I just can't imagine a life that's different from that because that's been my life and I'm never alone. And that's priceless to me. And I know there's a plan and there's a plan for this life and I believe beyond. And I know a lot of people don't believe that. I just can't imagine because that's not my story. And I do believe it so strongly and it shapes my life so much. And I mean, I could recount hard things in my life. I've got many I could tell stories about that. So it's not like my life is charmed or all goes so smoothly. No, of course not. But even if I seem to mess up, it's okay. And guess what? He weaves it beautifully as into part of the picture. I mean, you just have to read the Bible to see, boy, those people didn't have it all together. So it's a little comfort for me. But yeah, I think one of the things in retirement that I have been learning is that space is okay, that seeming to not be doing something productive in this moment or hour or even occasionally a day doesn't mean nothing productive is happening. It doesn't mean it's a waste. It doesn't mean that that space isn't just what you needed and that it's paving the way for something else. I hear you about the entrepreneurial journey, and I see that in my sons. And I see it now a little bit in me too, as I'm like, well, okay, I do want the next thing I would like it to make some money, some extra, have some discretionary
Yeah.
funds. That would be fun. And not just for the money itself, but I like the idea of that, doing some work and being paid for it. There's something really satisfying about that. And so even though I'm okay, I really do want to maybe find something like that next. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I sort of grew up when you go get a job and you do it this way. And I admire so much the path you're taking right now and the spaces you're giving yourself to figure it out and not just diving into I have to get this full-time thing. If your path goes that way at some point, fine, but you are open, open to something different, something better, and sometimes I know I just have to, like, preach that truth to myself. That little voice in your head will be like, "Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Nope, stop," because there's always a couple of voices,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that the louder one is the right one. So evaluating those and stepping aside and challenging them is good.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a big realization I had a couple years ago. What you mentioned, the loudest voice isn't always the right one. That I had this voice in my head that sounded so responsible and like, oh, that's the voice I need to listen to. But I think something I found that exemplifies this or is a good way to interpret it is internal family systems. It's a therapy concept that teaches that we have multiple voices in our head. And one of them is our real voice, our soul voice, if you will. And then we have a couple others, one of them including the manager voice, which is the one that I thought was my real voice. And it was the one that I followed for so long because it was the loudest, most responsible sounding one. But that wasn't I'm discovering, still discovering that that's not it, and that can lead to the shoulds of, "You should be doing this, you should be doing that." That has been such a big realization, and to learn how to work with each of those voices in the head and to let them take the back seat sometimes in order for my real voice to come through has been transformational.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. You're advanced in your years.
Thank you.
You learn so much. I've always admired that about you and just your work too in the program. Yeah. You really think and analyze and take to heart and in such a pleasing way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for that reflection and for your wisdom. And what we've been talking about this whole podcast, I think, is just so relatable with so many different life phases and your wisdom and the way that you took on those challenges and have been an example of trusting the process is really inspiring to me, and I'm sure others too. So thank you.
Oh, oh, it's been my pleasure.
So I know you mentioned that you have a couple new ideas for passion projects, and you might be sort of in that phase again where you're asking and not totally quite sure about what it is yet. But I'm curious if you want to share any little twinkles or ideas that have come to you.
Yeah. So I do think I'm in that asking phase again. We talked about where I was and how this book came about. And it's like, okay, I saw that come together and now really here I am again. But that's life. I feel like I've gotten one little nod toward, yeah, that would be a good thing, but then I'm still not sure enough. So I'm still asking. The thing that intrigues me is the idea of YouTube channel, and that primarily comes from I'm a huge YouTube channel watcher. and have been for years. So if I'm getting ready, if I'm doing dishes, whatever, I'm always popping on something from YouTube. So I have the channels that I follow. And so as I was thinking, okay, what next now? I feel like I want to do something else. I started watching some channels about creating a YouTube channel. And part of me thinks, "Oh, yeah, that would be creative and fun." And part of me thinks, "Ugh, no, I don't wanna be on camera. Not at this age, please, no." So, anyway, but I'm open to it. I'm like, "Okay, get over yourself. You are who you are, and you look like what you look like, and just if you have something that people would enjoy or learn from, would you wanna do it?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, of course I would." Knowing me, if I had to guess, I probably will dabble, and I'll probably have to give myself some amount of time, so it's not just such a fleeting thing that I don't even give it a chance,
Mm.
but I guess it remains to be seen for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I personally love learning from you. I mean, since college and even now. And I just love your voice. I love the way that you speak and how calm you are. And of course, you are beautiful too. So if that's any consolation to get yourself out there, but also I felt the same way about this podcast. And it's also something that I kept feeling called back toward. And, people would reach out to me and similar to your book, you should start a podcast. I have this feeling you should start a podcast. And I kind of felt the same way where I was like, well, what do I have to share that people would want to hear about? Or my voice, I would record and I would want to like edit every single thing out so that it sounded perfect or whatever. And I've had friends too who have wanted to start podcasts and feel the same resistance about putting themselves out there into the world like that. It is hard and it does feel sort of intimate in a way to put your face and your voice out there. And I'm sure you'll follow whatever you're feeling called toward through your praying. But I will say that it's not been easy like other things that I've done, like my photography business. Things like that, it just felt like everything happened and fell right into place, and I didn't really have to try, it just all felt so natural. And this was totally different because it didn't feel natural, it felt like resistance at the beginning, and still sometimes I feel resistance to share things. But it's a step-by-step process, and I think if that's something you decide to do that you'll know when it's time, and it might not be easy right away, but it will be worth it. And that goes for whatever that you choose to do next.
Really wise advice. It isn't always easy, is it? Even when we're doing a right thing, a thing that its time is now. It's a good reminder. It isn't always easy, and especially at first. So I think, yeah, I appreciate that. I take that all to heart, and thank you. And you seem like a natural to me. Okay, I'm just saying. I mean it. But I do think for that reason, I would have to make myself persevere for a certain amount of time because I know myself and I would probably just quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm a quitter, but yeah, it seems hard.
Yeah, I think that's such a good idea. Just like building any habit too. It's like some days you're like, "I know I dedicated this. I really don't feel like it today, but I'm gonna do it anyway." It definitely feels like that sometimes. Sometimes they're easier than others. I feel this with so many friends that I have now. We all kind of feel this same thing where we kinda wanna do something, but there's resistance to it, and it's like, we gotta just stick to it for, I don't know, 60 days, 90 days.
Yeah, I think that is wise because it does take a while. And again, I'm not a very patient person, but if you're if you're doing the good work that you want to be doing, then maybe it needs to germinate for a while and sit out there. And if over time it morphs or you get different guidance, then you'll change. And but in the meantime, it's like sometimes it just means keeping on. Like I honestly remember in Eau Claire, maybe 3 to 5 years before I retired, I was starting to feel like two things. Like A, I'm ready for something different. Not like I want out of this job or this career. It wasn't like that. It was just like it feels like it's time for something different. Might have even been even almost 5 years early that the first pangs of that started. But then it'd subside and then but it never totally went away. I would realize, "Oh, I'm still feeling like maybe something different." And I had a strong feeling about my house. The same thing. I had lived in it for almost 20 years when I moved out of it, and it was an old home, a wonderful old home that I loved. I had made it cute and cozy, and I was so thankful for it, but I got to about 3 to 5 years before I moved, I was just done. I'm like, "Okay, yes, I'm thankful for this house, and I want something different."
Mm,
But I couldn't put together what it was. I couldn't figure out, well, I'm willing to sell it, but what do I wanna go to? I didn't have that what's to. I'm willing to leave this job at some point, but to what? And so I just kept going. It wasn't drudgery, but just kept going because I didn't know to what yet. And so sometimes we have to do that too, I think. And now I see how smooth, considering all the change I put in my life in that one few period of months, and how smooth that went and how joyful it was. I think it's because of those years. I was getting ready for it. So when it came, I wasn't doubtful. I'm like, "Yep, I'm ready." But if it had happened 3 to 5 years earlier, probably wouldn't have felt the same.
mm. That is so wise too. And I feel that way right now where I'm like, I'm ready to move somewhere or um take on some sort of adventure, but it hasn't quite been defined yet. And I love what you just said that, you went through that period where you didn't know where the two was. Just like I don't know where my two is yet, but this is the tidbit I'm really taking is that when the time does come, you're ready.
Yeah. You'll know because you've been waiting for it. You didn't know what it was exactly,
Right.
but you'll be ready.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for sharing your wisdom today. And I know that just this simple conversation is going to make a beautiful impact, whether it's just one little thing that you said or the whole thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Klein. It has been, like I said, an honor and just really fun to sit here and chat with you today.
I agree.
So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And everyone who's listening, thank you for listening. If you feel inspired by Anne, go check out her book on Amazon. The link will be in the show notes. And is there any other resource or way to reach you that you want to share?
If anybody wants to connect with me through email for some reason, by all means reach out. It's grabbinginspiration@gmail.com. I had set that up for my Instagram some years ago, and then I needed an email kind of when I was doing the book. And so I thought, well, let me see if that's available. And it was. So my Instagram is also at Grabbing Inspiration.
I love that title. I'll link that in the show notes too, so that if anyone wants to reach out, they can reach you. Thank you again, Anne, and thank you all for listening. And I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon.